Welcome back, everybody. In this lesson, we're going to concentrate on common questions and answers for part 1 of the IELTS speaking test. By the end of the lesson, you'll learn and understand some common question and topic types for part 1 of the IELTS speaking test. And you're also going to see me constructing and creating model answers whilst talking about the language choice I am using to help me get those higher scores. So let's have a quick overview of what exactly part 1 is. We can consider part 1 of the IELTS speaking test to be our greetings and introductory questions from the IELTS examiner. The questions will be slightly shorter. Your test begins as soon as you open the door. I really like to remind students of this because you want to make a good impression. I know you're going to be nervous, but when you open the door, try and smile and look friendly and confident. In total, you will answer 12 questions from familiar, pretty easy to think about topics. And it's going to be between 4 to 5 minutes. Now you can see I've highlighted in red. Don't give short answers. You need to extend your language and use interesting vocabulary and storytelling to really explain in detail. Now, you shouldn't try and answer questions in part 1 using an answer of, say, 30 seconds, but you don't want to give really short 3 or 4 word answers. That will definitely mean you're losing marks. So here are 4 of the most common topics in part 1 of the IELTS speaking test. We have studies, home, work, and family. And I guarantee at some point during the IELTS speaking test, you will have to speak about all 4 of these topics. But in part 1, there's a very, very high chance that you will be asked questions about these topics too. So in this lesson, I'm going to go through some common questions for these 4 topics, plus some extra topics as well. And I'm going to be creating some answers for you to see how I'm up-leveling and upgrading my language. Okay, let's move on to our next stage, which is looking at common questions and answers for the topic of studies. Okay, let's take a look at our first question for the topic of studies. Are you currently studying? So, how would I go about answering this? I might say, yes, I am currently studying. Now, that's actually a pretty awful answer, and I can tell you why. You don't want to copy exactly what the examiner is saying. You need to paraphrase and change their language using synonyms. So you could say, yes, right now, instead of currently, I am learning computer sciences. Computer sciences, okay. But that's a little bit too short, I think. So I want to add some more storytelling and detail. Right now, I'm learning computer sciences, which I very much enjoy. Instead of like, we can use that synonym enjoy to make the language just a bit more interesting. So once again, instead of currently, we've used right now. And instead of studying, we used learning and sort of used enjoy instead of like to make our language a bit more interesting. We also added this part here, which I very much enjoy, just to add some extra detail. Okay, let's move on to our second question. What would you like to study in the future? Okay, so in this question, the examiner is asking us about something in the future. Therefore, we should use the future tense. Let's see. Instead of in the future, how could I make this more interesting? When I complete my studies in the future, in other words, I hope to study my master's in, let's say, civil engineering. Apologies for my spelling whilst I'm talking. There may be some mistakes, but I'll check and change as we go through. Okay, what subjects do you find the most difficult? Okay, let's move on to that. So, subjects that you have found difficult. I want to add an interesting opener for this answer. I feel like it's time to use one. So I could say, to be honest, I struggled. I found it difficult. So we're using these synonyms again. Struggled, difficult. I struggled to learn languages when I was younger. Hopefully, so we're adding some detail. Now I have improved my language learning skills. Okay, so that's a little bit of light-hearted detail as you're in an IELTS test. Hopefully now I have improved my language learning skills. Okay, so let's move on to question 4, which is, what are you currently studying? Okay, so again, we don't want to repeat the language. I'm currently studying maths, say. Let's try and make this more interesting. So if we were going to say we weren't studying, right now, I am not studying as I am working part-time. Previously, I was studying for, let's say, my degree. Okay. Excellent. So I've just added a bit more detail, a bit more storytelling. Is it a popular subject in your country? Now, this is a follow-up question. So the examiner may say, do you enjoy studying English? And you'll give an answer. And then the examiner will use this follow-up question of, is it a popular subject in your country? Okay, let's see. Subject is any topic of studies. So it could be English, it could be engineering, art, maths, any of these kinds of things. I'm going to say yes. So, yes, it is a very popular. So I'm repeating the examiner. Do I need to think of something better than popular? Yes, it is a very very highly studied. So instead of popular, I'm using highly studied. It is a very highly studied topic instead of subject that many students from my home country love to study. Okay, there we go. So that's my final answer. And you can see that as I'm writing these, I'm considering ways to change my language and improve my answer, giving details and making my vocabulary more interesting. Let's move on to the topic of home. Okay, here is our common question list. Let's begin with number 1. Where do you come from? Where are you from? Where is your home? It would be very easy to answer this quickly by just saying, I am from England, or I come from Europe, or wherever you're from. But you still want to add that detail to make it possible of scoring those extra marks. So let's say I'll give you my answer. I come from a small village in northern England. Is that enough? Could I add just an extra piece of detail to make it more interesting? I come from a small village in northern England. Okay, but currently I live elsewhere. I live somewhere else. Okay, so a bit of detail added. and more interesting language used. So what is your hometown like? Let's see. We need a synonym for hometown. Let's try my birthplace. Oh, the place of my birth is, let's think of some interesting vocabulary. A very tranquil, which means quiet, and beautiful place to live. But more detail again. It isn't very busy. In fact, now, so we've got an opener there, an interesting opener. In fact, now that I am older, I actually find it boring. Okay. So the place of my birth is a very tranquil, calm, peaceful and beautiful place to live, but it isn't very busy. In fact, now that I am older, I actually find it boring. Okay, question number 3. Who do you live with at the moment? So we can use the opener currently. I am living with my 2 close friends. What could we say about these friends? Do we like them? Where did we meet them? We met, using the past tense, of course, because we met them before. We met whilst studying at university 2 years ago. Okay, and again, a bit more detail. Do you live in a house or an apartment? So an apartment is a British word. In American English, they may say flat. So let's say right now, so we've got a bit of an opener to signal the start of our language. I am currently sharing an apartment with those 2 close friends, with my 2 close friends. Okay, and the final question for home. What kind of facilities are in your hometown? Facilities are places of interest or places of use that are available to you. For example, shops, gyms, swimming pools, these kinds of things, restaurants, bars, these are all facilities. So what kind of facilities are in your hometown? I'm going to say that we're from a busy city. As I live in the city centre, there are many facilities available to use around the clock. A very native phrase, around the clock. It means at any time. I consider myself quite lucky in that respect. Again, a very colloquial native phrase, this in that respect. I consider myself very lucky. I consider myself very lucky. Let's say very lucky in that respect. In the respect of having all these facilities close by. Okay, so they are there we've seen 5 common questions for the topic of home. Let's move on to work. Okay, question number 1. Have you ever had a part-time job? Remember, you can have a full-time job where you will work long hours, or a part-time job where your hours will be less, often fitted between your studies. So, have you ever had a part-time job? Yes, I have worked many part-time jobs whilst studying. For IELTS, I found, of course, we're talking about the jobs that we had before. I found them to be a great way to earn money. Okay, just added some more detail. What jobs do you think are the best? What kind of opener could we use here? Well, we could say, in my opinion, so we've got that interesting opener. I believe that I don't want to say jobs and repeat the examiner too often. I believe the best types of jobs, I believe the best types of work are ones that help other people, such as doctors or nurses. Okay. And question number 3, what kinds of responsibilities do you have at work? So the examiner is following up a question here. You may have said, I work part-time, and the examiner is asking you what kind of responsibilities, what tasks do you have at work? Let's say as a part-time waiter, I need to process orders and make sure customers are happy. They are my main responsibilities. Oh, but again, we'd be repeating the examiner. So what could I use? Tasks. They are my main tasks. Where do you want to work? In the future, I would love to work in a foreign country. Maybe the UK. Okay, so we're running out of space here. Just bear with me one moment, okay? Is it difficult? Is it a difficult job to get? So let's say that you were talking about being a doctor. The examiner may follow up with asking you, is that a difficult job to get? From my experience, another opener to signal the beginning of our language, you must work and study extremely, instead of very, extremely hard to become a doctor. I will try my best. So again, just adding that extra bit of detail at the end just to show the examiner that I'm confident in my language. So there are our 5 answers to 5 common questions around the topic of work. We're now going to move on to family. Okay, here we go. 5 common questions for the topic of family for IELTS Speaking Part 1. Number 1, we have, what is your family like? Okay, so what kind of things could we say about our family? My family really are very important to me. I cherish the time I spend with them. Okay, cherish means love, to like something very much. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. Do you get to see them often? How often do you see your family? Let's say I'd like an opener. These days, I don't see my, let's say, immediate relatives. So that's another phrase, immediate relatives, that you can use to replace family. Immediate relatives. It means your parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters. I don't see my immediate relatives as much as I would like to. Currently, I am currently studying full-time, you see. Okay, and question number 3. Who do you have the closest relationship with your family? Opener here. That's a very difficult question to answer. I would have to say that I have strong relationships with all family members. So if you want to talk about specific people, you can say family members. Okay, question number 4, family and childhood. What was your childhood like? So this is obviously going to be in the past tense. I have very fond memories. a very common collocation and phrase, fond memories, very good memories of my childhood. I think add some detail, I played almost every day. Sounds very nice. And we'll just extend this slightly. And we have our last question, which is family important where you come from? So again, asking you specifically about your experience from your home country. Yes, I do believe a great way to start your language in agreement. I do believe family is highly important in my home country. And you would, of course, maybe add some extra detail to that. Okay, so that is all for the topic of family. We're now going to take a look at a few extra questions from some of the other topics that are less common, but that you may see in part 1 of the IELTS speaking test. So let's move on to that right now. Here are 5 extra questions from 5 separate topics that are common, but you will not definitely be seeing them in part 1, just to give you an idea of the familiar topics in part 1 and IELTS speaking. So let's take a look. Do you like using computers? You can see in the question I've highlighted in bold the topic. So do you like using computers? And technology and computers is a very common topic in IELTS, the whole test, not just speaking, but in other sections of the IELTS test. So they're asking for our opinion, whether we agree. Actually, I don't really like using, let's say, technology. So I'm not going to repeat the examiner and say computers. I'm going to say using technology. I find it can give me a real headache. Okay, so that's adding more detail. We could just stop there and say, actually, I don't really like using technology. But that's a little bit short and it gives us less chance to show off our language skills. Question number 2. What do you like to do in your free time? Your free time, so hobbies and free time. Let's answer this question. So I'm not going to repeat the topic phrase of free time. I'm going to say hobbies. These days I have many, one moment, I'll just change this. These days I have many hobbies, including sports and languages. Okay, there we go. Sports is my favourite. And question number 3, let's move on to that. What kind of transport do you use the most? Let's answer this question now. What kind of transport do you use the most? So we could talk about cars, trains, buses, bikes. I think that the frequency that we will go for, the most used, will be buses. The traffic in my city. So an interesting way to begin your dialogue. You're talking about the traffic, then you'll give the answer to which transport you use the most. The traffic in my city is very chaotic. Therefore, I tend to avoid, let's say we don't really use most kinds of transport except for walking. Okay. So we're saying that we don't take the buses or the cars because the traffic's too bad. So transport, another common topic. And on to the next question. Another common topic is this, food. So you may be asked some questions about your eating habits in part 1 of the IELTS speaking test. So do you enjoy eating healthy foods? So we've used this these days. Let's think of an opener. I'm almost sad to say. So you're going to say something you're actually a little bit ashamed of. I'm almost sad to say that really I don't eat many healthy foods. It's something I would like to change though. Okay, so that really interesting opener, I'm almost sad to say. I'm almost sad to say that really I don't eat many healthy foods. Okay, so that is a question on foods. Another fairly common topic could be flowers, but it's less likely you'll see this. But it gives you an idea that the topics really in part 1 and IELTS speaking are things that you will have some understanding about. You shouldn't be surprised by the topic that you need to talk about. So, do you like flowers? I'm going to quite simply say, in all honesty, I don't really care much for flowers. I suppose they are quite nice though. So again, an extra piece of information to make my language more interesting. So that really is just some examples of extra kinds of topics and questions that you might get in the 12 questions in part 1 of IELTS speaking. Important things to remember are to try and add information, detail, and interesting language to your speaking. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this lesson. If you would like any more lessons like this, where I'm modeling language in this live recording situation, then please do let me know and I will try and add more lessons like this. Just a quick point, if you haven't given any feedback on the course yet, I would highly appreciate it. It really helps me to update this course and of course for students to find IELTS 7 Plus too. See you in the next lesson.